What I'm up to now is putting on the rocker arms, and the trick is to get the cam positioned just right. See how there's a gap there and there? You get it positioned just right, and you get the springs all the way down. So the lock nuts are as far down as they can go, and then you can adjust it to get the lash set correctly later. But the trick is get the cam just in the right position where none of it's actually on a lobe. See, the lobes are there's a gap underneath them, and then you can slide the rocker arms underneath there. Otherwise, if one of the lobes is pointing down, you can't push the assembly in there because there's too much spring pressure. So I'm going to get these set, and then I'm going to rotate the engine and make sure top dead center lines up with the mark right here, because the mark on this washer, you can see, I think the mark is right there. Because it's not at top dead center now, but this washer can go on 180 degrees out, where that mark can be over there or over there. And if it's 180 degrees out, then the valve will hit the piston when you're trying to rotate the cam, and then you know that it's out and you need to switch 180 degrees here. Anyway, I've got the other assembly right here, and I'm also just putting some let me set that there for a second. I'm also putting some Lucas oil assembly lube on the rockers and camshaft, just to make sure I don't scratch anything up when I'm putting all this together. Rocker arms on there, and I temporarily grabbed the balancer there, and you know, the balancer can also go on 180 degrees incorrectly. You can see there's put a little spray mark right there, but there's two Woodruff keys in there, and there's also two Woodruff keys on the crank. But you can see there's my little spray mark on that one right there. But there's also one right there. So you temporarily put the balancer on, and you line up. There's a mark on here that says, see if we can see this. Okay. See that right there? OT. There we go. OT, that's top dead center. So I lined up the balancer where top dead center was right in line with this edge right here. That mark was lined up with this edge. So that's top dead center on the crank. And you can see the washer behind the cam sprocket lines up with the top dead center mark. Now, this washer can go on 180 degrees incorrectly. So when you put it on, you got to make sure the crank makes a full rotation without the valves hitting. So we're just going to go around a full rotation, because if the valves hit, all right, that's about a full rotation. I think I went a little past it. Actually, this turns, every time this turns once, this turns half a turn. So I got to go around again to get the marks lined back up. All right, should be something right there. Yeah, there's my mark. right there. And the valves didn't hit while I was doing that. So that means the crank is installed 180 degrees, not the crank, the balancer lines up with that mark at top dead center. And this is not 180 degrees out because none of my valves hit. So that's how you find top dead center, thanks to one of the members on the om617 swaps group. So again, you put on your balancer, and you line up with the OT mark right there, and you make sure the balancer is put on the way you marked it when you took it off. There's my little spray paint mark. So I know it goes on that way and lines up here. Then you put the, this is already assembled, but you put the rockers on. And this was already together, and I had this lined up at top dead center to match the crank. And then you rotate it a full rotation until this comes back around. If the valves hit, then you know that this washer back here was put on 180 degrees backwards. So you take it off, flip it around, and put it back on. I got it right the first time. I got lucky. You got a 50-50 shot of getting it right the first time. You'll notice that I did all that without the spring tensioner in there. So now that I know everything's lined up correctly, I'm going to put the spring tensioner in there. I don't know if I need to put any oil down in there. I think that'd probably be a good idea, because I know this is pressurized with oil, so I'm going to squirt a little oil in there. And it's hard to do with one hand. There we go. I'm going to put the spring tensioner in there. Okay, you can see it moving. All right. And I don't know if I need to squirt a blast of oil down in there or not. I'm not going to. I'm going to let the engine just oil things itself when it fires up the first time. And I'm going to go ahead and put these guys in. And then the cap, when you put the spring in the cap, it says to torque that cap to 90 Newton meters or 60 foot-pounds. Let's see, here's the other one. It's kind of dirty. All right, so I'll torque those down. And then here's the cap from my original. That's basically a plug, and it retains the spring. And the spring's pretty difficult to compress all the way down there, because you can see it only goes in that far. So you gotta really push to compress this guy. Let's see if I can do it with one hand. Okay, that's not going to happen with one hand. Anyway, I'll get that put together. Chain tensioner is torqued to 90 Newton meters or 66 foot-pounds. Didn't find the torque spec for these, but those bolts are anywhere from, the size of those bolts is probably 20 foot-pounds, 18, 20 foot-pounds, something like that. Put on the chain guide on the front. There's a screw that goes in here to locate it, and then a pin. I'm going to coat that with a little bit of the sealant, because it says to do that in field service manual, and then I'll just tap that in with a brass hammer. What is that? I guess that's some type of locating something for the valve cover. Never noticed that. Anyway, timing's all set, and getting really close. The injection pump's over here. I just got it back from Ben's Force. Haven't really looked at it, but was rebuilt back to factory specs. So looking forward to putting that on. Anyway, it's coming along nice. Almost back together. Just got to rebuild those injectors. Well, here's the big question today. This is the injector pop test, I guess you call it a pop test, kit that I ordered from Mercedes Source a few years ago. And I used it to rebuild the injectors in one of my cars. So I've got all the different shims, some new heat shields. There's some old ones there. But here's the injector bodies, and you can see these injector bodies, I think they're just mix matched. Like this half might have come from one injector, this one from another one. And they still have all the internals. There's the spring, there's a spacer, here's the little, I forgot what you call that. And then there's this piece. But they're dirty and they're rusty. So I can clean them off. I have some fine grit sandpaper. And then I can lap, the face of them by going like this, put some water on there and lap the face of them to smooth everything out. But really the question is, can I use all these parts? I think they're from various different injectors, but they're all there. I clean up these bodies, maybe take them to the machine shop. But then I'll just order some new injector nozzles. These are the old injector nozzles that originally came out of my gold car. And these things, they're old, and they'd probably still work, but they're not in good condition. But really, I'm trying to determine, do I need to order a new set of these? Since these have, been mismatched with, this half came from one, this half came from the other, and the parts are probably mismatched in between them. Or can I just clean these up, use the correct spacers, and I'm not going to have any leaking issues is what I'm concerned with, because they've been mismatched. Anyway, you guys chime in. Let me know what you would do. This is actually one I got online. But yeah, chime in. Let me know what you would do. All right, today I'm going to start assembling the oil pan. And I wanted to put the front crank seal in, and this seal ring is a wear item. You can see the little mark where the other seal was riding on the seal ring. Now, I've done a front seal replacement on an om617 before, and this ring just slid off. Well, in this case, this ring it's seized on here. I don't know if seized is the right word, but this ring is not coming off. I've tried like putting a small screwdriver back there and trying to tap it in to wedge it off, but it's not coming off. But if I rub my screwdriver across here or rub my fingernail across here, this is just it's almost just like that's a polish spot. It's not actually a groove. There is no lip whatsoever. Yeah, you can't feel anything, because you're only supposed to replace it if there's a groove, and there is nothing. There is no groove there at all. Can't feel anything. So anyway, I'm going to put on the let's see, the front seal retainer and the oil pan, and get this thing together. Alright, I was just going through the instructions for that front sealing ring, and it says pull off spacing ring with puller if noticeably worn, and mine is not noticeably worn. So rather than go through the trouble of breaking that thing apart and getting it off the crank, I'm going to leave it and just do it down the road in another 100,000 miles or so once this engine's got some miles on it. I think I came up with a solution for the fact that I can't get the front crank seal spacer ring off. So this is the original that came off the engine. I've cleaned it up, and that's why it looks so good, but it's actually 40 years old. So here is the L-ring spacer. Here is a seal, and here is the Mercedes. So if you look closely, well, I don't know if you can tell on this camera. There we go. The Mercedes is the original Mercedes is taller than both of these. And then the seal lip, which is right here, these are going to ride in a different place than this one is. You can't really see on the camera, but this is taller, so it pushes the seal lip farther. It'll be farther back onto the crank. These are shorter, this L-ring being the shortest. So what we've got here, I'll show you an example of what I'm talking about. Here is an old spacer ring that was pulled from another engine that I did a swap on. Alright, here's the ring on my engine. See where that groove is? Well, look at the groove on this one. It's in a completely different place. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to use this L-ring because there you go. The lip is right there. If you look at the original Mercedes, it's in a totally different place. And even the aftermarket Mercedes, that pretty much looks like the same place as the original, but this L-ring is in a totally different place. It's going to ride on near the front of the spacer ring, kind of like this one right here. Alright, so my theory is right. I've just mocked up the front seal retainer and that L-ring seal, and if you look in there, there we go. You can just see that the old groove is visible, and it's farther back. Let's see, can you see that? Let's see if I can come at it this way. There you go. See that little shiny part there? Well, the groove is in a different place than where this seal is going to ride. So, voila, don't have to take that off. Right here I'm test fitting the Mercedes replacement, and you can really see how this one does not ride in the same place. You can clearly see the old groove. So this one actually fits even better. It's going to ride in a completely different place. I know it's hard to see, Let me try it from this angle. There you go. You can clearly see the old groove is further in. So this is actually going to work. I don't need to replace that spacer ring. This one fits even better than the L-ring. The L-ring was a little bit closer. So the next part is the oil pan, or the crankcase pan. And it says before to put it, let's see. Let me get back to a picture of it here. That says, yeah, that the turbo oil return tube needs to be installed first, and there it is. This needs to, if new oil pan upper half is installed, insert the oil return pipe and contoured gasket first. Renew the damaged or porous contour gasket and O-rings. So I've got, there's a new gasket there. There's a couple new O-rings. Here's the original oil return. Got a little dent in it, but that won't matter. So I'm going to take off these old gaskets, which even though they're 40 years old, they look perfectly fine. That's crazy. Anyway, I'm going to take those off and install it in there. So step one for getting this in there is just put a bunch of oil on here, and you've got to slip this grommet over the end. Now the way you do that, you put it on here and then you wedge a screwdriver in there, and be careful not to break it, and you pry and turn as you're prying, and you can pry it and get it over here. And then next you're going to want to put the O-ring on here. See if I can do that with one hand. Yeah, probably not. Put the O-ring on there, then you slide it down in there, because the O-ring goes all the way to the bottom. And then once that's in there, then you can wedge this gasket, this grommet. See, there's a little lip right there, and that little lip goes under this little lip right here. Looks like when it's done. And you want to make sure that once this is in here, you press down pretty hard and it slides all the way down to the bottom. Right there to the bottom, there's like a little ledge that it comes down to. Otherwise it won't be seated all the way in there. Alright, I am just test fitting the oil pan. And man, there's a lot of bolts. There's 30 of these, 3 of those, 4 of those, 2 of those. So these right here go in the very long slots and the medium long slots. And then you have 2 here and the same on the other side. So those are these guys here. There's just one oddball. I think I remember this is used to make one of the transmission lines clear. It's got a spacer. And then these 2 right here are for the studs that are in the front. And then you have 30 of these. I think 22 are used on the crankcase pan, and then the lower oil pan is the rest of them. So I'm going to put the anaerobic sealant on there and screw this thing on. For the anaerobic sealer, you use a surface prep. You spray this on there on the surfaces, let it sit for 3 to 5 minutes. Then you put on a bead of the anaerobic sealer. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. To mention before I start, before everything's screwed down, you want the front crankcase seal. You need to make sure that's lined up and the holes are lined up. And there's an alignment tool. There you go. Goes like that. And I think just let's see what size. Let's see, let me put this back over here. I would think maybe these. That could go down in there. Or that one. I mean, either one of those could work. I'm not sure where these three go right here. I want to figure that out. You put it on there, you want to make sure that the rear rope seal is coated. We'll put some oil on there. And also put some Lucas pre-assembly lube on there. Now, I'm guessing these corners are going to need a little help sealing. Not sure, but I'm going to go ahead and start the process. Before I install this, I've got this tool which slides over the crank and guarantees an exact circle when you're assembling the upper oil pan and front crank seal retainer. That seemed important, so I ordered it. It was like 80 bucks, 85 bucks. Came from Germany. There were none left in the States. So I've got this surface prep sprayed on here, and you can see it's just this like blue, and it just makes it like super dry. You can see there's some there. It's like a... Anyway, I'm going to coat this with the sealant, put a thin bead around here, and then go put it on the engine. I just squeezed a thin bead around here. Probably a little thicker than I needed, but we'll see how that works. That's the point of it being anaerobic. If it squirts out into the oil pan, it's not going to harden. And you can see I got a little extra back here around the seal. I'm going to put a little extra around here because that's always a weak spot in engines. Anyway, I'm going to go mount this. So I have all the bolts torqued on the oil pan. These are 10 Newton meters, which is 7.4 foot-pounds, which is 88 inch-pounds. So I used an inch-pounds. These right here, I really didn't know, so I just snugged them up. Because all these are just snug. They're not excessively tight. 7 foot-pounds is not a lot. I mean, it's like, that's it. It's not much. And then the instructions say, you know, insert this. And before these bolts on the retainer are tightened, basically just put them in to make sure they thread into place. And then it says torque these down first. Once that's done, then you torque these bolts down. And what you end up with, this can't come out. That tells me that that's a solid seal. And they actually include a hole in here so you can stick a piece of metal in there and twist it off. So I'm going to do that now. Right, I just twisted that off, and that is now a perfect concentric circle. And you can see the anaerobic sealant squirted out. I probably put a little bit too much in there, but that's the point of it. If it squirted out inside the crankcase, it's okay. This never dries unless it's made contact with the air. Unless the air is removed. So if there's any inside the crankcase, it'll just mix in with the oil and get flushed through the oil passages. We can see we got a good bunch of goop back in here where the rear main seal seats, or where it mates up. Let's see. All right. I put a little extra right there so it would squirt out around there. So I'm going to let that dry for a little while, and then I'll, yeah, right there you can see I put a little much. See, it squirted out the side, but again, that won't dry. So cool, that's on there, and it's done correctly. If this thing leaks, I'm just going to shoot myself in the head. Anyway, to show you why we use the anaerobic sealer. There you go. See down in there where some of the sealant, let's see if I can get the light. There you go. Squirted out inside the crankcase. Let's see. There you go. That's why, because that right there, there's some right there. That's not going to harden and break off and clog the oil passages. Right, I'm preparing the seal to put on the engine. I've coated the outside edge of it with aviation sealant. It's not silicone. Don't want to put silicone. And then I'll put some heavy grease on the inside so it'll go over the ring, seal ring, without bending the lip of the seal. It'll allow it to slip on there. Here's a little trick from our buddy Kent over at Mercedes Source. He provides this little top here, and you put a washer on it, and then you can just press the seal in, and if it's greased up, you know, it shouldn't bend the lip of the seal. And basically you put it in there. We're going to press it in with this. And hopefully it's going to go over there okay. And I think that is in there. And that's about as in there as we can get it. And you can see the aviation sealant kind of squirted out the sides. That's going to give it a that's going to give it a great seal. And you can see how the grease, see the lip of the seal appears to be okay. It's all over the ring, and the grease helped it to slide on there. I know that's kind of tough to see, but that's the trick to doing it, is having one of these guys. There's some guys that take a solo cup and slit it and put the solo cup in here, and then slide this over the solo cup and then pull the solo cup out so it doesn't roll the lip of the seal. But I'm doing it this way. I have the lower oil pan, and I'm going to use the L-ring gasket, and no RTV is required for this, no sealant. These types of gaskets don't require it. And you only want to torque these to 10 foot-pounds. And you kind of want to do it in probably a star pattern so it equally distributes. And I'd go around with an Allen wrench and, you know, just snug them up a little bit and do a final star torque. But if you over torque it, you ruin it, and it bends the pan, and it's no good. And 10 foot-pounds, I'm sorry, it's not 10 foot-pounds, it's 10 Newton meters. I'm not used to this damn metric shit. Which is 7.4 foot-pounds, which is 88 inch-pounds. By the way, this is the aviation sealant. It's like a prime seal type 3. It never really it's not silicone. Anyway, Mercedes source packages it as aviation sealant form a gasket. Here we are, starting to look like a completed engine. You know, when you got a new oil pan and it had the Mercedes sticker on there, so I'm just going to leave it so it looks brand new. Just looking at everything. Wiped off where that sealant squirted out the side. The next big thing is the injectors and injection pump. But that seal's on there perfect, man. Had the tool to put it on there right. It's pressed in there right. That thing better not screw up. I was reading about this, putting this in and making sure it's lined up correctly with the timing marks. It's the timing sensor. I was reading about that today. Anyway, got to order a couple of more lower oil pan bolts. I was missing like 5, which is really weird. I don't know why. It's not like me to misplace bolts, because the rest of them were in a baggie, but for some reason there's 5 missing. So it's coming together nicely. Stay tuned for more action. So Mercedes requires a special tool to knock in the dipstick, but what I've found is that this is a 4AN wrench, and you can see there's the lip. This is aluminum, and this is, I'm pretty sure this is steel. So what you can do is put this over there, and then you can see where I've been banging it with a brass hammer, and it's actually tapping the dipstick in. You hold it at an angle and tap it in. Now the problem is you can't get it off once it's in there, so my plan is just to cut it off and sacrifice this, you know, $6 AN wrench after I've got it tapped in there. But basically, you put it in there, and you hold it with one hand here at the angle, and you tap it, and it's just going right in there. So anyway, that's the plan there. See how it sits like that? Well, it fits on that lip perfect. Well, it was going pretty good. Then I got down to this depth, and it's making contact here, so I'm going to have to lift it up and shave down one side of this and then keep doing it.